start talking about information. Information is a very important part of Christianity. Information might be considered the core of Christianity. I have 17 propositional statements that I would like to present to you for your consideration. Obviously, you know, if you know me or you've been here before, that was not how we're going to do this, right? Yet, when it comes to Christian information, a lot of times that's how we treat it, isn't it? We treat information as an intellectual exercise. We treat information as merely something that we receive and think about and affirm. We can be content with propositional statements that we see in the Bible for ourselves and affirm in our brains. And we live in a world that's bombarded with information, right? I mean, you don't have to go very far. You can open up your news feed on your Facebook or Twitter, and you have information overload. Information is constantly coming at us. So the question arises, what role does information play in Christianity? We're talking about our vision here at Arbor Drive is to connect people up with God in relationships with other believers in order to go out and advance the gospel. And over the last 3 weeks, I have been arguing that the way that we grow in that is through relationships, experiences, and information. And information is the last piece that needs to be connected. And then next week, we're going to come back and we're just going to look at all three of these together very practically. And the whole crux of this is I've been arguing that relationships, experiences, and information is the way that Jesus made disciples. And if you remember 3 weeks ago when I first started this series, we sort of talked about each one of those a little bit. And it seems to me that the church, by and large, in America, is completely centered around and obsessed with information, especially if you are part of the Reformed tradition. If you're outside of that, maybe in the more charismatic circles, you're obsessed with experience. If you're in the seeker-sensitive circles, you're obsessed with relationships. And what I'm arguing is not that one is more important than the other or that one should be ignored, but that all three are essential and they work together and need to be kept in balance in order for it to be effective. So what is the role of information in Christianity? What is the role of information in church and discipleship? I think there are two dangers with information. Number one, we can focus on information that's decapitated. We can focus on information in a way that's decapitated. Here's what I mean by that. It's all about how I feel. It's all about my emotions. It's all about my heart. Just tell me things that make me feel good. It's this therapeutic Christianity where the pastor gets up week after week and gives you sermons about how super special snowflakey you are, and you just need to believe in yourself more. And here's 7 steps to a better marriage, or 7 ways to have more success in your job, or whatever else. I just want to feel good. No thinking required. It's the heart without the head. It's decapitated. And as a pastor, I've talked to people like this. Leave doctrine and theology out. Just make me feel good. This is too doctrinal. I don't want doctrine. I don't want theology. I don't want to think. I just want to feel. Therapize me. The other danger, though, the second danger, is we can focus on information in a way that gets us big-headed. I don't want to feel. I just want to think. And what happens in that is we get so obsessed with thinking and information as an intellectual exercise, as an academic exercise, that we don't ever feel what we think about. Give me doctrine, don't mess with emotion. It's the head without the heart. I've talked to people like this also. And I would submit that both of these views are wrong, and my aim in the sermon for the rest of our time is to convince you of that. We can conceive of the Christian faith as fundamentally being about information. Doctrines, truths, propositional statements, things that the Bible says, when Christianity at its core is fundamentally about worship. That is what Christianity is about at its core. It is worship. Information then serves worship. Information is not an end unto itself. It serves the greater aim and the greater goal of worship, of enjoyment of God. Worship is ascribing value or worth. It's treasuring. Information is a means to the great end of enjoyment of God. So if the way we think about information doesn't lead us to worship, then we're thinking about information wrongly. And this cuts both ways. So we can worship a God we don't know and have made up because we're all heart and feeling and no head, no truth. But we can also know a God we don't worship because we're all head and knowledge and no heart. You see the balance here? I'm trying to make sure that we start off avoiding going into one of these two ditches. We need both. So, I want to ask two questions. What is the goal of information? And what is the role of information? Number one, what is the goal of information? I am arguing that thinking serves longing. Thinking is a servant of longing. Information has worship as its goal. Information is not just cranial. It's cardiological. It's the head and the heart. Information is a marrying, Christian information, when done rightly, is a marrying of the head and the heart. And somewhere along the way, in the American church, in certain circles that most of us would tend to probably run in more than the other circles, we've divorced those two in a way that elevates the head and devalues the heart. In the other circles, it elevates the heart and devalues the head. But in both cases, those two, the heart and the head, have been divorced. And I'm arguing that Christian information serves the purpose, when accompanied by the Spirit, of awakening what Jonathan Edwards, the great Puritan theologian, called holy affections. And holy affections happen when the head and the heart are remarried, when they're reconciled. Edwards argued that there are two faculties in every human being: understanding, and that's by which the soul perceives and judges and discerns and views things. But the second one is the will. And that is the thing by which the soul is inclined or disinclined, is pleased or displeased, approves or rejects. And in our language today, the head and the heart, right? For what we're talking about this morning. And Edwards knew that emotions can be manipulated. His seminal work, Religious Affections, was written because there were these revival preachers that were manipulating emotions. And he wrote Religious Affections to show the balance. Affections are necessary, but they need to be right affections, holy affections. He said this, that true affections arise from the mind's being enlightened rightly and spiritually to understand or apprehend divine things. That's information. So for Edwards, information serves the goal of raising holy affections. Information serves the goal of raising holy affections. Inclining the will, which then in turn motivates and propels action. So information is not an end to itself. It has a goal, namely, for Edwards, to stir holy affections. What I want to do for the next 30 minutes is just try to prove this is true, because I think it is. Edwards nailed it. I think he's dead on. And I think that part of our problem is that we have forgotten some of the lessons that our forebears learned and thought about and wrestled with. And this gets at the heart of our discipleship problem in America. If the goal of information, or is the goal of information simply to know more about something, to fill our heads with facts. Now listen, here's why I'm bringing up discipleship. Because in a lot of cases, when we talk about discipleship, what do we talk about? Go to this class. Listen to this preacher. Get information. What we've done is we've subtly equated gaining information with discipleship. And for Christ, discipleship is not just information, it's transformation, right? Jesus said, "Come follow me and I will make you fishers of men." I will make you into something that you are not now. I will change you. And if the goal of information is merely to fill our heads with facts, or affirm a certain set of facts, or believe a certain set of propositions without any affection or heart-level transformation, then we have accomplished nothing more than making either Pharisees or demons. The Pharisees did that. That was their thing. And then James says, you believe that God is one, you do well. Even the demons believe that. You're not doing any better than them. You see what I'm getting at here? If we just have head, if information is an end unto itself, if it's all about just intellectual intake, we're no better than demons. And that's because at its core, Christianity is about affections. At its core, Christianity is about affections. What did Jesus say is the greatest commandment? You shall love. That's an affectional word. Love the Lord your God. Now, how did he say you love the Lord your God? With all your heart, right? With all your soul, with all your mind, and with all your strength. See, Jesus married the heart and the mind. He didn't divorce those two. And when he was talking about what does it mean at its core to be a Christian, he was talking about affections. The whole person, the whole being, the mind and the heart. So belief is not merely affirming propositions. Belief is treasuring and trusting. And in order to really believe, treasuring is necessary. Your heart must be engaged. You cannot, I'm going to say a very bold statement here, but you cannot be saved and have no heart-level affection for God. That's why I say it's the core of Christianity is affections. And therefore, information serves worship. It serves affections. It serves delighting in God. Information in the Christian context isn't only aimed at changing thinking, in other words. It's aimed at changing thinking and loving. We're created as lovers. We will love something. We will worship something. Information serves the aim at changing what we love and changing how we think. This also means that the goal is not just to change behavior apart from the heart, right? Because we can fall into that ditch too. Information is about change your behavior, behavior modification. It's the difference between knowing and doing versus loving and doing. You will do what you love, not just what you know. Let me ask you this. We're going to get a little bit closer to lunchtime here, and there's probably going to be some growling stomachs. And I'm guessing there's probably some health-conscious people around here. How many of you have ever sat there around lunchtime and been like, I want some kale. I want a kale salad. No salad dressing, just the crunchy, bitter herb of kale. If you did, you're not normal. That's not normal. You'd like, I want a cheeseburger, right? I want pizza. You might know intellectually that kale is better for you. But as soon as you start thinking about the taste of pizza, pepperoni pizza with extra cheese, thin crust. Nice and greasy. Are you going to eat kale? No. So we have our brains and we might know information, but we are fundamentally lovers. We're fundamentally longers. And our hearts, what we long for, what we desire, in most cases, govern what we do. So I want to set this up. I want to show this from Colossians chapter 3. So go over to Colossians chapter 3 real quick. In Colossians chapter 3, there's this really interesting passage here. And Paul says, and I think he's making this point. He's going to make this point here. You're not just what you know, you're what you long for, what you want. We seek what we long for and value, not just what we know. So Colossians 3, 1-2 says, therefore, if then you have been raised with Christ, seek the things that are above where Christ is seated at the right hand of God. Set your minds on the things above, not on the things of earth. So there we go, right? Set your mind on the things above. Information. Just think about the right things. But verse 1 sets up verse 2. And I think the NIV absolutely nails the translation when it says, it translates verse 1 in this way: set your hearts on the things above. The word means to desire, to pursue. Desire is essential for seeking. We seek what we long for and value. Let me just show you this in two other places real quick. In Matthew chapter 6, verses 31-33, Jesus says, don't be anxious about what you will eat or what you will drink or what you will wear. The pagans seek after, same word, desire, pursue such things. And then he says, but seek first, same word, desire, long for, pursue. Seek first the kingdom of heaven and his righteousness. So Jesus is saying that the world values, longs for, desires something, and then they pursue that thing that they long for and desire. And we should be different. We should pursue and long for and desire something different, namely the kingdom of heaven. Or in Matthew 13:45, there was a merchant who went seeking fine pearls or pearl of great price. What caused him to seek them out? He valued them. His heart was set on them, so much so that in this parable, he was willing to sell everything that he had to get that one pearl. So Paul, in verse 1 of Colossians chapter 3, starts with the heart, with valuing. If you have been raised with Christ, if you are a Christian, you will value differently than the world values. You will value the things above. And you will pursue and long for and desire the things above. And then he comes to verse 2. So in verse 1, you have a new longing, a new desire. And then he says, set your minds on the things above. Well, you have to know something to set your mind on it, right? I mean, information is essential. We don't want to discount the importance of accurate information. But my question is, to what end? To stir longing. Because your heart is already there, your mind is serving your heart. Think about this. Josh was teaching Sunday school one time, and he brought this up about when he was dating Amber. When you're dating your spouse, or when you were dating your spouse, or are dating your spouse, you keep doing that, whatever. What happens in that? Why do you want to know more about that person? Why do you enjoy spending time with that person? Why is it when that person tells you about their day, you listen and you take it in? Why do you care about what color their eyes are? Why do you care about what color their hair is? Why do you care about what their birthday is? Why do you care about what their favorite food is or favorite movie or all those questions that we ask in the dating phase? Why do you care about that at all? Why do you want information? Because information serves longing. The information serves desire. Conversely, right, you can get to know somebody, and as you get to know more information, they become less and less desirable. Why is that? Because the information conflicts with what you value, right? So that's what Paul is saying. David said the same thing in Psalm 1. The righteous man delights in the law of the Lord. That's valuing, treasuring, desiring, longing for. He delights in the law of the Lord, and therefore he meditates on it day and night. Thinking serves delight. So the goal is worship and heart transformation. Now, let me just say something real quick. This is why I'm not too worried about what unbelievers think when they come in here. I'm not trying to entertain them. I'm not trying to entertain you. That's not my goal. My goal, every time I stand up here, our goal when Joe and I plan worship services, Joe's goal when he chooses music, the whole goal of all of the information that's communicated through song and preaching and prayer is aimed at awakening or enlarging a greater desire for God by presenting you with a galaxy-sized view of God. And that's not going to entertain unbelievers. Yet it will be irresistibly compelling to the heart that is captured by God, because that's eternity. What do you think you're going to enjoy your hobbies in heaven more than God? Heaven is going to be discovering and seeing and enjoying new facets of God's glory for eternity. We're going to be captured by God. In Revelation, it talks about the beauty of the city and everything else, and we'd be like, oh yeah, that's beautiful. And what does it say? It says that Jesus eclipses all of that. In 1 Corinthians 14, 24 to 25, it says that when somebody prophesies and an unbeliever is there, it exposes the secrets of their heart. So one of the roles of information is to expose the secrets of the heart, the longings, the desires, the things that we love for what they really are. And that can be painful, right? That can be uncomfortable. That can be challenging. And what every person in this room needs right now is that galaxy-sized view of God. And that is what information serves. The heart needs to be captured by the magnitude of God. That's what the gospel does, isn't it? While we were still sinners, Christ died for us. And then that information serves your love for God, your longing for God, your delight in this God who doesn't ask you to clean yourself up, who doesn't depend on you in any way, but comes in your filth, in your wickedness, in your sin, and saves you. The aim of that truth is that you would be affected here, not just here. And second quick side note, if you struggle with sermons or the worship service or the worship and song on Sunday morning, let me just ask a question, rhetorical, but could it be that the reason, at least in part, is because you are viewing what we do on Sunday morning as a mere intellectual exercise, and your heart is not engaged? You view it like studying for a test. Like sitting in a lecture in college where the aim is to pass the test. I just need to make sure I get all the points and I memorize all the points and I can regurgitate all the points. Being enthralled with God and the gospel is one of the goals of gathering with the people of God for worship. It's one of the goals of communicating information. So when you come, are you enthralled with God and the gospel? If you have one truth that stirs your heart for God, and you sit there in a moment of awe and wonder, and your heart cries out in joyful thanks, or you sing a lyric that causes you deeper joy in God and you are captured by that truth. If you see one thing that stirs your heart and makes you long more for God, and you leave with that one point and nothing else, that one observation written down, but your heart loves God more, did you get something out of the worship service? The aim is not merely to fill your head. The aim is to awaken and excite your heart. And this should be really encouraging for moms that struggle with littles, right? You're wrangling your kids. You feel like, oh man, I didn't get 3 of the 4 points, or in my case, 8 of the 10, whatever. But there's one thing that you heard. You heard 5 minutes. 5 minutes of something that captured your heart, made you love God more, stirred your affections, renewed your mind in some way, and caused you to love God more. Are you content with that? Are you happy with that? Did the word have its intended purpose? Yes. So the role of information is to give us a vision or a picture of reality. And reality is we are created for God. He is the source of all joy. He has designed us and knows how we were made to function. And in functioning that way, we will flourish and find the good life. The role of information is to redirect our hearts to long for the true Holy Grail versus some cheap knockoff that looks right but is really a forgery. Information is aimed at redirecting the heart. And here's the thing, marketing people get this. Right? When was the last time you watched an iPhone commercial that gave you specs for the iPhone? Like, this is the processor that it has, this is the this is the that, this is the this is how fast it starts up. Like, when was the last time you saw a commercial like that? What do truck commercials do? They give you some information, right? It has, this much horsepower and this much torque. What is that aimed at? That's aimed at the dude that's like, I want more horsepower and torque. Yeah. If I had more horsepower and more torque in my truck, I would be happy. I need that. That's what marketing is. When you look at the iPhone, it shows you a sleek iPhone and beautiful people laughing and FaceTiming and everything else. And what they're saying is, this is what the good life is. You want this, and this will bring you that. Marketing people understand better than most Christians the role of information. And we get amazed. We're like, how do people get duped for this stuff when we get duped for it ourselves? But here's the thing. The iPhone will become obsolete in 3 weeks, 4 weeks, a month, 2 years, whatever. The truck will be obsolete. There will be a better one. Everything that we see in commercials is fading away. And God doesn't do that. God does the same thing with information, except it's real. Fullness of joy, pleasures forevermore. Information serves our longings, our delights. If we have God, we get what we long for the most, and it delivers every time. So the role of information is heart transformation. The role of information, or the goal of information, is worship. So what's the role? I would argue that the role of information, so we understand the goal of information is heart transformation and worship. That's what information is aimed at. What's the role of information? Information serves to reorient our heart, not just fill our head. Information serves to reorient the heart, not just fill our head. Christian information is an invitation into the enjoyment of worship. Have you ever thought about it that way? Everything that you read in the Bible, everything that's preached from the pulpit, everything that's sung on Sunday morning, every prayer, every piece of information for a Christian is aimed at your heart enjoying God more. It's an invitation into enjoyment and worship. And this is the space where transformation takes place. So your mouth and your hands are instruments of your heart, right? Jesus said, out of the abundance of the heart, the mouth speaks. So what he's saying there is what we do is connected to what we want or value. Not just what we know, right? Kale. We know kale is good for us. It tastes like garbage, and we want a burger. Those two become in conflict at some point. Now how do you want kale? Well, if you value weight loss, if you value health more than taste buds, probably want kale, right? Your mouth and your mouth speaks, your hands act as instruments of your heart. And for Jesus, hypocrisy is honoring with our lips, but our hearts being far from him. That's Christ's definition of hypocrisy. It's saying the right stuff without loving and longing rightly. You see that? For Christ, hypocrisy is saying the right stuff, even knowing the right stuff, without loving and longing rightly. I want to show you this. Matthew 19, verses 16 to 23. We're all probably pretty familiar with this. This is the rich young ruler, right? A young man comes to Jesus. He says, "Teacher, good teacher, what must I do to be saved?" And Jesus says, you know the commandments. Don't steal, honor your father and mother, all that. And he goes, "Oh, yes, I've done those since birth. I've done that." Right? And Jesus says, okay, one more thing. Sell everything that you have, give it to the poor. Come follow me, and you will have treasures in heaven. It's exactly what he says. And the narrative says that the young man left sad because he was very wealthy. So here we have a guy. What's his problem? Is his problem that he doesn't know the right stuff? No. Is his problem that he doesn't do the right stuff? No. What's his problem? His problem is he doesn't love the right stuff. Or maybe a better way to put it would be he loves the wrong stuff. Now, it's very interesting when you take what Jesus said, "Come follow me, sell all your possessions, give them to the poor, come follow me, and you will have treasures in heaven." Because in Matthew chapter 6, Jesus says, "Where your treasure is, there your heart will be also." And what the disciples saw was a playing out of Matthew 6:21 right before their eyes. The young, rich ruler had treasures on earth and valued the treasures on earth, so his heart was with his treasures when Jesus offered infinite treasure in heaven if he would just abandon all of the things that he loved on this earth and follow Jesus as his ultimate treasure. Right? Do you see that? It's insanity, right? It is insanity to give up fullness of joy and pleasure forevermore for temporary joy and a little bit now. That's insanity. And yet that's what sin does, right? Because sin affects our minds. The young rich ruler's problem was not his knowledge and was not his action. His problem was that his heart valued wrongly. And what we see in Ezekiel chapter 36, verse 26, is that the new covenant brings a new heart and a new spirit within us. And so now we're enabled to love rightly and think rightly. And that leads to living rightly. The people of Israel had all the right information. What was their problem? The problem was their hearts. And Jesus used the love of this rich young ruler's love of wealth to show a lack of love for God and expose the heart. So for Jesus, in that encounter, the information was aimed at exposing the heart. The issue is not whether we love, but what we love. We're all captured by some picture of flourishing and what that looks like, and we pursue that. And Christian information is an invitation to treasure something better, to long for something greater, to be satisfied in something more lasting. It's an invitation that serves the aim of calling us to love differently. Information in discipleship should make your heart sing. Christian information should make your heart sing. And the result will be that we live differently, transformation, because we pursue and love differently. The role of information is to open our eyes to see and love with our hearts. Do you know what the biggest barrier to transformation in your life right now is? Let's be real honest with you. It's not that you don't know the right stuff. It might be the case in a few instances, but for the most part, in our congregation, the issue is not that you don't know the right things. It's not that you don't intellectually affirm the right things. It's that you don't love the right things. It's that you don't long for the right things. It's that your heart has not been captured by the right things. In 1 John chapter 2, verses 15 to 17, John says, don't love the world or the things of the world. All of these things are fading away. If you love the world, then you don't love God. Paraphrasing. What's John saying? He's saying that being a Christian changes the heart, and the instruction is aimed at the heart. In 1 Timothy chapter 1, Paul says the goal of our instruction is love. That's the goal. It's to change, reorient heart. In 1 John chapter 2, John is assuming that the reader is jarred by the idea that God is not their ultimate love. Right? So if you read that and you're like, oh my, I don't, if I love the world in an ultimate way, in an ultimate sense, then I don't love God. An unbeliever doesn't care about that. Why? Because the unbeliever loves the world. The aim of that information is to jar the heart, to be like, oh man, I need to love God more than I love everything else. It should be jarring to us. Sin is longing for things, desiring things, hoping in things other than God. Sin is when something else or someone else sits on the throne of your heart that was meant to be only occupied by God. And so the goal of information is to reorient and realign the heart to love what we should love, to value what we should value, to hope in what we should hope in. So Jesus says that if you love me, you will keep my commandments. Jesus does not say that keeping my commandments is a means of loving God, but he does say that it's a demonstration of a love of God. If you don't keep commandments, what's the problem? The problem is you're loving wrongly in some area of your life. What's the purpose of information? To realign your heart to love rightly. When Jesus says that, he says, if you love me, you will keep my commandments. Love precedes obedience. Obedience is not a means to love. It's an outflow of love. And love is actually a response to beauty and glory. So information serves the goal of revealing, pulling away the veil of beauty and glory to behold God as he is, in order that we might love him more, which results in transformed living out of love. It's confirmed in John 3:19. Jesus says that they loved the darkness rather than the light. That's why they didn't come to the light. Their love, their heart, their longing. Information serves to realign the heart to love what we should actually love. You can tell someone they're in darkness all day long. Guess what? It doesn't matter. They might even believe it. They might affirm it. Yes, I am in darkness. This is true. But they have to hate the darkness, not love the darkness. And the problem is we love wrongly. When you say don't run out into the street, you'll get hit by a car, the assumption that's underneath that is you value your life more than being in the street. Right? When we hear the news media, their aim constantly is to get us to act and love and long for different things. They don't just present information. They present information as a means to longing, loving, desiring, awakening some emotional response. We can't disconnect the head and the heart. Lewis understood this. He used storytelling to awaken affections for Aslan that translate into Christianity. He said when he wrote Narnia, or said of writing Narnia, that it wasn't an allegory. It was a sort of thought experiment. What would Jesus be like if he incarnated into a world of talking beasts? So the goal is, in Narnia, we see certain truths, certain attributes of who Jesus is. We see goodness, we see gentleness and righteous anger, we see goodness and beauty. But Lewis writes it in a way that envelops you into an experience of this, envelops you into your heart longing for this. We are invited to know him in our world. And Lewis teaches through the narrative what to look for. But more importantly, Lewis primes the heart to love Christ when we see him. We see the value in Aslan, and then we see Jesus in our world, and we're like, oh, it's the same. I want that. One writer puts it this way. With Aslan, Lewis had a tabula rasa, clear slate. He could enjoin the reader to feel love and devotion without the suffocating sense of duty. He could convey his own great gratitude and love for his God without sermonizing. He could, as he once put it, steal past those watchful dragons. So the role of information is heart reorientation, to see and love the beauty that's revealed. So what does this mean for us? All of this to make a massively important point. You cannot change the heart, and Christian information cannot be aimed at mere behavior. Information is not an end. Information doesn't change behavior if it bypasses the heart. And God is the only one who can change the heart. That means that the purpose of information is an instrument to be used by God to bring about a supernatural change, which you cannot take credit for, that confirms the power and authenticity of God. So I can plead with you all day long. I can inform you. I can't change what you love. Which means that Christian information is always presented in a posture of dependence, humility, and self-humiliation. In other words, we're recognizing constantly that, no, I can put this the most eloquent way possible. I can't make it penetrate past here down to here. Only God can do that. Right? Listen, when we get that, when we not just understand that, but when we believe it and live it, and when that one little nugget of truth seeps into our hearts, boy, does that not change everything? Parents, doesn't that change how you approach teaching your children? Doesn't that change how you deal with when your children don't love what they should love, what you want them to love? Doesn't it change how you approach the unbeliever down the street, or how you encourage the believer next to you? Because it's not about you. Like you're giving them, you're the messenger, and you're totally dependent upon God to do something with it. Which also kills pride, because you can't just say, oh, I've told them that 15 times. Why can't they get it and just change? What's wrong with them? It only took me 12. When we miss this, we become moralistic and Pharisees. Now, I just want to give you a few texts. You can go to them. I'm not going to read them, but Matthew 23, verses 6 to 7, and then verses 27 to 28. And Luke 16:15. In Luke 16:15, the Pharisees were concerned about behavior and perception. Parents, your role is to tell them and show them and invite your children into the beauty that you behold. Which means that you can know the right things. You can give them the right doctrine. You can catechize them up one wall and down the next. But if you don't love the truth, if you haven't been changed by the truth, if they don't see something different in you, which also means that we first have to be changed before we can be effective messengers. At the end of the day, you are a messenger. Instruction is aimed at a heart being satisfied in God. And when that happens, it brings about real and lasting change. And can I just be straight with you? Some people here in this room are frustrated with the Christian life because you are focusing on what to do, not who you love. You got a list, and you're checking off the boxes of the list, and you're not seeing what all of that points to and who all of that points to. This also means that the church is not merely an intellectual institution like a university. The goal of the church, the goal of Christian education, the goal of all information is to not just cause us to think well, but to cause us to think well and love well. In other words, the church is formative as well as informative. The gospel comes to us through information, but the aim is not just being able to memorize, recite, and regurgitate propositional truths. The aim is that we would be affected by those truths. That when we believe, they would change our hearts and our longings and our priorities and our lives because we see the beauty of God more and more. And in seeing beauty, we are brought up into enjoyment of that beauty and pursuit of that beauty. In other words, the whole person changes. You can affirm truths and not be changed by them. We must incarnate truth. It must become part of us. Another point of application is this: information requires careful thought and meditation to move into the heart. So don't just consume, memorize, and move on. We need to do the hard heart work of thinking and meditating and contemplating. Thinking moves truth beyond the head and internalizes it into the heart. In Philippians 4:8, Paul says, whatever is trustworthy, whatever is true, think about these things. In 2 Timothy chapter 2, verse 7, he says to Timothy, meditate on these things, the Lord will give you understanding. In Psalm chapter 1, the godly man meditates on the law of the Lord day and night. The psalmist says, I've hidden your word in my heart that I might not sin again. We could keep going. The book of the law shall not depart from your mouth, but you shall meditate on it day and night. Thinking is an important part of taking in information, not just memorizing, not just regurgitating, working it into ourselves. So when you think about the gospel, what do you think about? I'm separated and alienated from God. I'm dead in my sin and trespasses. God sent Jesus to be a substitutionary sacrifice. If I trust in him, my sins are taken away. His righteousness is credited as mine. I will spend eternity with him. I'm forgiven. I will go to heaven and have fullness of joy and pleasures forevermore. When we say preach the gospel to yourself, implicit in that is that you meditate on that. Like holy, righteous, perfect, self-sufficient, doesn't need anything, created everything by the word of his power. God, who sustains and holds everything together in the universe. Who you rebelled against. Came to earth. and took on human form and experienced everything that we experience. The fact that God would experience hunger should blow your mind. And he experienced hunger for you so that you might know him. You have to think and pause and slow down. And our culture is at such a fast pace that we can't stop. Can't meditate. We're uncomfortable with silence. Yet the only way that information goes from here to here is by meditating and thinking about it and applying it. And it stirs thanksgiving and worship and response. And if you can hear those propositional truths and you can think about that and it doesn't do anything here, what is going on? Show me somewhere in Scripture where that is either normative or acceptable for a believer. Information serves your heart, but if you gloss over it because you know it and you can recite the propositional truths and then check that box and don't spend time thinking on, contemplating, meditating on the wonder and glory and beauty, it will become no better than memorizing facts in history class and affirming that it happened. We approach information like hospital food. It's just bland. It'll keep you alive, but it needs hot sauce. The way it gets hot sauce is by thinking, meditating, applying, responding. In Psalm 19, David said that the word of God was sweeter than honey and the drippings of the honeycomb. I think in part because he meditated on it day and night. Information also is communicated in many different ways, not just in lecture. It happens in conversation. It happens in nature. It happens through relationships. It happens through example. But Christian information must always be grounded in the objective truth of God's word. God's word serves the heart to love God as he is. God reveals himself to us. Have you ever just thought about that? God tells us about himself so that we might know him as he is and love him as he is. One final thing, one final application. All information, all learning should be learning for God's sake. When Carla was in physical therapy school, she had to do a cadaver lab. They took a human body and opened it up and looked at all the different parts. And she would regularly come home and tell me how amazing it was that this body functions the way it does, the genius behind God's design, the way it holds itself in equilibrium. When you learn anything, when you get information that is true, that is revealing something about God, if it's true. Which means that like when you do science class, students, science class is not aimed at you just knowing science and passing the test. Science class is aimed at you rejoicing in and delighting in and worshiping God. When you see history class, when you do math class, when any information that you consume that is true, its aim is your worship of God because God has created this whole universe to reveal him that we might worship him. So we should pursue information, but we need to pursue it in a way that is aimed at our hearts, not just our heads. Let's pray.